Spark Sark. My name is Alana. I'm a mental health therapist. I've been doing therapy since 2014, and I get the question asked of me quite often is, what are you seeing is bringing in your clients? What's bringing a lot of people to therapy? And I think that's a great question. I appreciate people being curious, and I'm about to share with you something a bit controversial, a pattern I've observed. A root cause for people to come into therapy is actually being victims of narcissistic abuse. So basically, I'm observing, and I'm not saying all my clients are coming in for this reason, but definitely a fair share of my clients will come in and they just want someone objective to hear what's going on, and they are aware that they could be in the wrong. And so I don't try to ever make snap judgments. I try to really listen. Many sessions, need to go through before I really start to see or observe this pattern of what's going on, and I try to make sure that the client isn't lying to me and that they are seeing the situation clearly as well. And time after time, I'm observing and noticing, and even my clients are figuring it out on their own too, that they are dealing with a lot of stress, or sometimes it can even turn into full-blown anxiety disorders or major depression, symptoms of trauma, chronic stress from interacting with an individual that has this personality style of narcissism. So they might be interacting with someone who continues to try to manipulate them, or who won't ever meet them halfway, compromise, understand their perspective. That lack of empathy can be very damaging. And whether my client tries to talk to the narcissistic individual, they might get minimized, deflected, blame shifted. Narcissists very often are not wanting to ever reflect or see that they are at fault. They don't want to see any flaws. They want to always portray themselves and want others to see this image of them always being in a positive light, whether they are either need to be sympathized as the victim, or that they need to be admired as the victor or a champion. So what this means is that my clients are having to deal with an individual, whether it's at work, at school, at home, or even at church. So many different environments. I think I've heard and seen them all now at this point, where they are having, due to circumstances, to deal with an individual, or sometimes they love this individual. They're in a relationship with them, and they didn't notice these traits, and a lot of times these tendencies and traits of the narcissist were actually withheld. They were not shown until they were many months or years into the relationship. At that point, my client might be very attached or in love with the partner who has narcissistic traits or the full-blown personality disorder, and they might be trying to communicate how they're being affected, how they're feeling. And if you have a person with narcissism who doesn't have empathy and has a very strong sense of entitlement and arrogance, these are all symptoms from the DSM-5 for narcissism, then they might not ever get through, right? There's no resolution. And my client, meanwhile, is time after time being told that they're in the wrong and that they are at fault. So my clients will come in with true, deep psychological and emotional pain and suffering and confusion. They don't know what's up or down anymore. They feel like they can't trust their instincts. And so what you have with this is that I'm noticing a lot of other therapists are afraid to go there. They're not noticing this pattern, or they're blaming it on other things that are really misinformed, to be honest. I've heard therapists say, like, oh, I think it's not narcissism, it's autistic spectrum disorder, but a lot of people with autism actually have more sensitivity and more empathy. And so it's just, we're therapists, we're not all perfect, we're human too, and so we can get information wrong. There's a lot of disorders and psychological information out there. But I've done my fair share, a great deal of research, and I'm really starting to, it breaks my heart to see so many clients, so many people that are trying to look at what's going on, to take accountability, look at their emotions, to improve their relationships, to own if they're at fault, and they're being abused. They're being, emotionally and psychologically manipulated, and then the narcissist doesn't ever want to come into therapy. I'm not saying that's always the case, but more times than not, it is. So it's, how do I help these clients that are dealing with individuals like this? And there's a lot of, there's more videos coming out on social media that are showing narcissists talking about their disorder and how they're self-aware and that they're working on it. So we now know that this is something you can actually work on. This is something you can try to heal from or manage. So the argument that this is just a disorder, a defense mechanism from childhood, they can't help it, is not true. And a big part of it is a choice, a defense mechanism to not reflect, to not introspect. But narcissists, as we have seen, are capable of this. Different narcissists coming out are proving this every single day. So a lot of what creates a narcissist is the people around them enabling and not ever holding them accountable, by not actually really just holding firm with boundaries, with consequences. I see a lot of it's not always on parents, very often they're doing their best, but if you continue to coddle and enable and see your child, your adult child, as doing nothing wrong and not holding any accountability or any consequences for their behavior, then they very likely will never change or want to grow. And if we look at this at a grand scale, we live in a civilized society, and we are mammals, we are social creatures. There's a lot of people in the world, billions. There's, whether you like it or not, there's a lot of people around, and we need to get along, or it behooves us to. If we ever want to reach society's full potential, we need to actually try not to tear each other down. We need to not sabotage each other, and we actually need to face the facts. We need to face reality and not spin the narrative to a twisted view where we're always seen in a positive light. In fact, dealing with someone who does that can be downright dangerous. We live in a society that respects science, and yet we're seeing a uproar, a surge of individuals who don't seem to respect objective facts, logic, social logic. It's narcissists, very often these individuals will spin the narrative so that they are seen as never at fault, and that they don't actually believe in the inherent value of truth. They just believe in truth being what most people will believe. So therefore they can and very often will want to manipulate the narrative. They won't want to ever own their flaws. We are all imperfect people, and we need to actually hold these people accountable and stop saying that it is just a disorder. It's a personality style. It's a personality style disorder, but it is something that can be changed, improved upon. As much as we expect people with borderline to improve, we need to expect people with narcissism to improve. And it's frustrating to me that people, therapists, other people in my profession aren't making this connection, that this is a root cause for what's bringing a lot of people into therapy and causing a lot of psychological and emotional damage and harm. So I just want to raise the awareness about that.